Welcome to this explainer, everyone. I am so pumped you're here today because we are going to unpack something truly fascinating. We're going to pull back the curtain on one of the absolute most recognizable, heavily scrutinized, and relentlessly analyzed figures in all of modern professional sports. Yep, we are talking about NFL All-Pro tight end Travis Kelce. Now look, whether you know him from his unbelievable, completely logic-defying plays on the football field, or maybe you know him from his incredibly high-profile off-field relationships, or honestly, just his larger-than-life booming personality whenever there is a camera pointed in his direction, you almost certainly have a very specific image of him locked in your mind. We all do, right? The media portrays him as the ultimate showman. He's the guy who is always on, always laughing, always ready with a viral soundbite. But let me tell you, there is a whole lot more happening beneath that flashy surface than you might ever expect. What we are doing in this explainer today is looking directly at a highly revealing, incredibly candid interview where Kelce completely drops that persona. He just lets his guard down and opens up entirely about his core operating system. We are talking about his deep life philosophies, the psychological hurdles he's had to jump over, and a deeply personal concept he actually refers to as Funism. Now, I want to be absolutely clear right off the bat so we're all on the same page. This isn't just a sports breakdown. This isn't just X's and O's about football. Not at all. This is fundamentally about the psychology of how a human being operating at the absolute unforgiving pinnacle of their craft navigates the extreme, crushing pressures of the modern spotlight. It is about how he battled his way through some intensely dark periods of deep inauthenticity, and ultimately how he found a highly structured way to reclaim his joy and his resilience. So if you have ever found yourself in a situation where you felt like you were just putting on a front, wearing a mask for your boss, your friends, or the public, or hey, if you're just inherently curious about the mental architecture of a champion, you are absolutely in the right place today. Let's get right to it and see exactly what we can learn from the Travis Kelce playbook. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to start by examining a champion's real mindset. From there, we'll move right into impacting the next generation. Third, we are going to confront the trap of inauthenticity. And finally, we will unpack the resilience playbook. All right, let's dive into section 1, a champion's real mindset, and exploring the concept of funism. So I want you to really think about this for a second. When you think of Travis Kelce on the field, what immediately comes to your mind? You probably picture those flamboyant, wild, custom-tailored outfits he wears during the stadium walk-ins, right? You picture the elaborate, meticulously choreographed end zone dances that end up all over social media. You picture that iconic Ric Flair walk, just strutting down the field, letting things completely run wild after picking up a massive first down. On the surface, if you're just a casual viewer, he looks like a guy who just doesn't have a single care in the entire world. He looks like someone who is just effortlessly coasting on pure physical talent and natural charisma. Like everything is just easy for him. But what this deep dive actually reveals is that this outward display of massive joy, it is not an accident. Not even a little bit. It isn't just him showing off for the cameras because he wants the attention. It is actually the result of a very deliberate, conscious, and rigorously maintained life philosophy. He operates on a much deeper frequency than the SportsCenter highlight reels would ever suggest. And this brings us directly to this really fascinating concept of funism. Funism isn't just about, throwing epic parties or making sure you're the loudest guy in the room. Not at all. It is a specific mindset strictly dedicated to enjoying every single moment, maintaining a genuine, authentic, positive energy, and, crucially, this is the most important part, using that perspective to navigate difficult times. Think about how completely exhausting it is to maintain positive energy in a high-pressure environment. Whether that's the NFL or a high-stakes corporate boardroom, most people crack. They fold under the weight. But Kelce uses funism as an active daily survival tool. He talks about how people appreciate him because, even if his passion runs a little too hot sometimes and he catches an unsportsmanlike conduct flag every now and then, it's genuinely him. There's no fake filter. Funism is about aggressively, stubbornly refusing to let the heavy, negative weights of life, the media, or the scoreboard crush your spirit. It's an active, daily decision you have to make when you wake up, to find the joy, to force yourself to be present, and to project a positive energy that not only keeps your own mind grounded, but naturally, magnetically draws your teammates and the people around you toward a shared goal. It's quite literally his operating system for surviving the intense pressure cooker of professional sports without completely losing his mind. Now, you might be thinking, okay, the guy is at the absolute pinnacle of his craft, so he must have everything in his life completely figured out, right? Well, not exactly. Because when he was asked what he actively wants to improve about himself, and we're talking about taking football, route running, weightlifting, all of that completely out of the equation, his answer is incredibly grounded and honestly deeply vulnerable. He openly, flat out admits that he didn't take school as seriously as he probably should have growing up. He talks at length about his father. He describes his dad as a man who possesses this amazing, almost intimidating ability to sit down in the living room, flip on Jeopardy, and just relentlessly, effortlessly ramble off the correct answers nonstop, category after category. And Kelce looks at his dad, this encyclopedia of a man, and thinks to himself, man, I should have that in my genes. Where is that? Why didn't I get that? Instead, he humorously describes himself sitting there on the couch, feeling entirely lost. He actually compares himself to Alicia Silverstone's iconic character in that 90s movie Clueless. He's just sitting there, totally clueless. It's a really funny, very self-deprecating moment, but the core of it reveals a profound, genuine pursuit of knowledge. He expresses this deep want to improve his intellect, to actively teach himself the common knowledge he feels he totally missed out on, and to understand the workings of the world far, far better than he currently does. He freely acknowledges that his learning curve simply isn't where he wants it to be right now. And I just want us to pause and think about the level of vulnerability it takes for a multimillionaire, multiple-time world champion to sit in front of a microphone, on camera, and admit, you know what? I feel intellectually insecure compared to my dad, and I want to fix it. It completely shatters that arrogant, untouchable athlete stereotype we're so used to seeing. He isn't afraid to highlight his own flaws and state a very clear, very humble goal for internal self-improvement that has absolutely nothing to do with catching a football or scoring a touchdown.
Moving right along to section 2, impacting the next generation and paying it forward.
So, to truly understand what drives his massive, undeniable dedication to community work today, we actually have to rewind the clock a bit. We need to look at the eclectic, honestly kind of wild mix of childhood heroes that completely shaped his worldview as a kid. The self-awareness we just talked about, knowing his own flaws, appreciating his massive cultural platform, and embracing that funism mindset, it naturally overflows into how he views his personal responsibility to kids. Just look at the names on this list. It is quite a lineup. He was absolutely obsessed with the golden era of professional wrestling. He mentions the wrestler Mankind, and he specifically points out that, yeah, even though it's a little awkward to admit now because the character was so bizarre and unhinged, he deeply, truly loved him. He loved that Mankind was an Ohio guy, that he had this crazy, gritty, underdog backstory, that he put his body on the line going hard all the time, even when he could barely walk. And of course, he loved the infamous Mr. Sacco move. Kelce actually laughingly admits that watching that move made him want to shove a sweaty sock into his own older brother's mouth during their living room wrestling matches. I mean, we've all been there with siblings, right? He also idolized Rey Mysterio for doing all those insane, high-flying, top-rope flips, proving day in and day out that a smaller guy could completely dominate giants in the ring. But it wasn't just wrestlers. Beyond the ring, he was absolutely mesmerized by traditional athletes. He idolized Deion Sanders, primetime. He talks about sitting for hours in front of the TV playing Sega Genesis, just mashing the C button over and over and over again to make digital Deion do his signature high-step moves. He talks about playing out in the dirt with a little Deion Sanders action figure, vividly imagining he was returning a punt for a game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. He remembers being a tiny toddler in Cleveland, maybe 3 or 4 years old, absolutely refusing to take off his oversized Bernie Kosar jersey. He looked up to legends like Larry Bird. We are diving into this nostalgia today because Kelce vividly, viscerally remembers the pure awe he felt looking up to these absolute titans. That specific memory of childhood wonder, that is the exact engine driving his charity work right now. He knows intimately, deep in his bones, what it feels like to worship an athlete, and he wants to leverage that exact dynamic for something positive. When you look at this table of his initiatives, you really start to realize this isn't just some standard run-of-the-mill PR checklist meant to make him look good. He is actively trying to recreate that exact feeling of awe he had while watching Deion Sanders' high step, but he's weaponizing it to do actual, tangible good in the real world. For example, he works heavily with shadow buddies, physically stepping into hospital rooms to support children dealing with severe, life-altering illnesses. He brings that giant, genuine funism energy to lift their spirits when they are at their absolute lowest point. There is the Eric Berry's Backpack Challenge, making sure local students are properly equipped for the school year so they don't feel left behind before classes even start. He pours hours and hours into Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City, directly mentoring local youth who just desperately need a steady, reliable figure in their corner. And the very interview we are breaking down today for this explainer, he agreed to do it strictly because a significant portion of the proceeds went directly to pediatric cancer research, funding critical medical advancements. You see, he recognizes that kids are the literal future. He doesn't sit there and pretend to understand every single struggle a child might face. He openly admits he can't put himself in everyone's shoes because there are just so many different, incredibly complex backgrounds and hard ways of life out there. But the one universal truth he completely intuitively understands is the mind of a kid looking up to a sports star. He knows that simply walking into a room, just being present, putting a massive smile on a kid's face, or maybe telling them that even an all-pro football player struggled with homework and had to grind for a good GPA, well, that can entirely rewrite that child's perspective on what is actually possible for their own life. Kelce's entire charitable philosophy is captured so perfectly in his own words right here on this slide. I can genuinely put myself in kids' shoes and see how they look at a professional athlete. Why not try and present a positive way to change their perspective? He looks at his massive platform. We are talking millions and millions of followers, the constant camera flashes, the undeniable cultural influence. He looks at all of that not as a burden and certainly not as an excuse to isolate himself in a mansion somewhere. He views it as an incredibly powerful tool. He remembers looking at Bernie Kosar in that oversized jersey, and he realizes with this really sobering clarity that right now, tonight, kids in the Kansas City community, and honestly all across the globe, are looking at him the exact same way. If he can give them just a shred of hope, if he can make showing up to school seem just a little more important to a kid who might be struggling exactly like he did, then he feels a profound, unbreakable duty to do exactly that. It is all about leveraging his elite status to inject a heavy, healthy dose of funism and real, actionable hope into the lives of the next generation. Let's move to section 3, the trap of inauthenticity and losing the real Travis.
I want to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about it. Can you identify a moment in your own life where you felt like you were putting on a front? Have you ever walked into a brand new workplace or a big social gathering or maybe even a new romantic relationship and you felt this heavy, almost suffocating pressure to project an image that wasn't authentically you, just so you could survive or be accepted by the people in charge? Hold on to that feeling for a second. Let it sit there. Because this is exactly what the interviewer asked Kelce, and it opens up a deeply, deeply vulnerable conversation about the unseen, crushing pressures of the NFL microscope. Look, it is so incredibly easy to look at a highly successful, wealthy, famous athlete and just automatically assume they've always been supremely confident. We assume they've always been entirely comfortable in their own skin. But Kelce opens up about a dark, confusing period in his early career where he felt he had to completely suppress who he really was. Because when you are a young player, living under the intense, unforgiving scrutiny of NFL management, sports media, and the court of public opinion, the terror of making a mistake is paralyzing. The temptation to manufacture a safe, boring, easily digestible persona just to protect your paycheck and your career is absolutely overwhelming. And because of that immense pressure, there became two vastly, vastly different versions of Travis during those first couple of years in the league. On one hand, you had the genuine Kelce. This is the guy who was deeply authentic, incredibly present, and naturally just soaked up the joy of the moment. But most importantly, the genuine Kelce is the guy who answers calls and texts from his friends and his family. He is a fiercely loyal guy who prides himself on being down in the trenches for the people who supported him way before he was ever famous. And then, standing right in opposition to that, there was the image Kelce. During his early years, he admits he was terrified of giving the Chiefs front office any reason whatsoever to question his character. He literally lived in constant fear that if he showed too much personality or if he stepped out of line even an inch, they would just ship him off to another team and his dream would be over. So what did he do? He tried to be this kind gentleman, this straight and narrow corporate guy who didn't live a vibrant life at all. He tried to appease the team management at all costs. But the emotional cost of maintaining this fake, sanitized, perfectly ironed image was absolutely devastating to his soul. He got away from his true friends, he distanced himself from his own family, and the most profound, truly heartbreaking example he shares from this era is missing the wedding of a man he loves dearly, his former college teammate and absolute best friend, Dan Gardano. I want you to really imagine that for a second. Kelce missed his best friend's wedding, a totally once-in-a-lifetime milestone because he was distracted doing what he now calls silly stuff. He was busy trying to build, manage, and protect a public image that he didn't even truly want in the first place. He alienated himself from his own blood, his own support system, just to appease people who ultimately only saw him as an asset on a corporate spreadsheet. As you can imagine, the sheer, exhausting weight of managing that fake persona eventually boils over. You can't keep it up forever. As he put it perfectly in this quote, "Although it seemed like I was myself, I felt like I was trying to portray an image. You start to fall away from who the real you is." I really want us to think about the spiritual weight of that statement. On the surface, the fans watching on Sunday and the media covering the games might have thought he was just being the classic, fun-loving Travis Kelce. But internally, behind closed doors, he was micromanaging every single perception. When you spend literally all of your waking energy trying to appease everyone else's expectations of you, you inevitably, slowly, day by day, lose track of your own actual identity. Kelce openly admits that this period killed him emotionally. It crushed him. Sure, he was physically present at practice. He was physically present at the charity events. But spiritually and emotionally, he was entirely hollowed out and completely disconnected from the core values that actually meant something to him.
Now, this massive, painful disconnect between the man and the mask reached its absolute peak with what we can call his reality TV regret. The interviewer brings up his old reality dating TV show, Catching Kelce, noting that a lot of fans at the time thought it was just a super fun, goofy way to watch his personality shine through. Just some harmless entertainment, right? But Kelce's internal perspective on it is entirely different, and honestly quite dark. He states very clearly that the show wasn't genuine to who he was, at all. Yes, physically, in the flesh, it was literally him on screen. It was him kissing all of those women and going on those elaborate dates. But mentally and emotionally, it was a rigid, scripted character. He was participating in this hyper-visible media circus to portray a very specific, carefully curated image. An image he desperately, frantically hoped team management and the public wouldn't question. He was prioritizing PR over his own authenticity. It is the ultimate tragic paradox, isn't it? Going on national television to be seen by millions and millions of people while simultaneously hiding your true, actual self from every single one of them. He was trying to craft a version of himself that was bulletproof from professional criticism, and in doing so, he engaged in behavior that pushed him miles and miles away from the real Travis. He views it as a severe low point of inauthenticity, a really desperate attempt to feel secure in his career by sacrificing a piece of his soul. So, this begs the huge question. How do you navigate those profound, soul-crushing lows and actually reclaim your life? We all go through incredibly challenging times. Every single one of us. We all have chapters in our lives where we feel like we've completely lost our way, where we've compromised our morals, pushed away the people who love us most, or dug ourselves into a negative psychological space that feels utterly, totally impossible to escape. Kelce found himself standing right at this exact crossroads. He was haunted by being kicked off his college team in the past, he was struggling with his fake corporate image in the pros, and he was feeling completely detached from his best friends. As the interviewer notes, people often fail to realize that the darkest times will eventually pass. But they don't just pass by magic. They don't pass because you just sit around on the couch waiting for the weather to change. They pass because of highly specific, deliberate actions. So what exactly did Kelce do to engineer a comeback and return to a true state of funism? This brings us to Section 4, the Resilience Playbook, and escaping the negative space. This brings us to a foundational, absolutely life-altering realization. When asked what he actually did to pull himself out of the mud, his answer wasn't abstract. It wasn't some philosophical mumbo-jumbo. It wasn't about relying on a therapist to fix him or waiting for management to suddenly treat him better. It was about extreme, radical ownership. He says, the only power you have in this world is making a decision. He is dropping absolute, undeniable facts right here. He points out that no matter how hard you train, there is always going to be someone out there who is stronger, faster, or more agile than you in athletics. And even outside of sports, if we look at the cutthroat business world or academia, there's always going to be someone smarter, someone with better family connections, or someone possessing better natural characteristics. You literally cannot control your competition. You often cannot control your immediate circumstances or the tough hand you were dealt. But the ultimate undefeated equalizer in this life is your own agency. Nobody on this entire earth has more power than you do when it comes to the choices you make in the next 5 minutes. Whether it's choosing to go right, left, up, down, or even something as unbelievably simple as deciding which hand you're going to eat with today. Owning your daily, minute-by-minute decisions is the first and most critical step to taking your life back. If you are going through something brutally tough right now, even if it isn't entirely your fault, you have to take extreme ownership of your response to it. Kelce's playbook for resilience boils down to 3 highly actionable steps. This is the true operational side of funism. Step 1, as we just established, is to own it and make a firm decision. You have to aggressively, immediately stop blaming the people around you. Kelce had a light bulb moment where he realized it was never the coaches, it was never the media that were the core problem, it was always his own flawed decision-making. Once you actually own the problem, you move straight to step 2. Establish a brand new early morning routine. If you want to change your internal mental state, you have to physically change your external daily patterns. And step 3, find a new passion to lock in your focus. You desperately need a psychological anchor to keep your mind from drifting backward into a sea of past regrets. Let's look a little closer at the deep psychology behind exactly how he executed steps 2 and 3, because honestly, they are incredibly effective for anyone, whether you're a professional athlete or not. So let's look at step 2. This is what we can call the early morning catalyst. Kelce decided, you know what, I am going to get a whole new routine. I am going to wake up early.
But he didn't just set an alarm, wake up early, and stare blankly at his phone scrolling social media for an hour. No, he used that quiet, uninterrupted time to do something highly productive before the rest of the world was even awake. He would knock out a grueling physical workout. He would sit down and read dense material to improve that intellect we talked about earlier. He would watch complex game film, or he would listen to intense motivational speakers. He explains that doing this literally triggers a chemical response in your mind. It forcefully manufactures confidence. Think about it. When you take absolute, undisputed control of your morning and accomplish something difficult right out of the gate, it forces a positive, dominant outlook on your brain. You are no longer just reacting to the day. You are preparing to aggressively attack the day. By securing those quiet, solitary, early morning victories, he was essentially biohacking his own attitude. He built an invisible internal armor before 7 a.m. that allowed him to effortlessly roll with any punches, criticisms, or unexpected challenges the rest of the afternoon might throw at him. He won the first hour, so he won the day.
And finally, there's step 3, finding your summer baseball. Alongside his brand new militant morning routine, Kelce knew his brain needed a healthy, all-consuming distraction. He needed something else to love, something that wasn't totally wrapped up in his current stress and anxiety. For him, that meant turning to summer baseball. Now, baseball was a sport he had enjoyed his entire life, sure, but re-engaging with it during his darkest NFL days provided a crucial, immense psychological benefit. You see, there is a very specific zen that comes with extreme physical focus. When you find a new outlet or hobby, it demands your complete, undivided cognitive attention. It keeps you hyper-focused on what you should be doing right now, in the physical, present moment. Think about the reality of baseball. If you were standing in a batter's box, deeply engaged in tracking a 90-mile-per-hour fastball that's coming right at you, and you're trying to hit it, your brain simply does not have the bandwidth to ruminate on the PR mistakes you made last week or the best friend's wedding you missed last year. You are completely locked in the now. You have to be. As Kelce says, that is true fundamentalism in action. It's not just blindly smiling through the pain. It's the active, relentless process of finding a new routine, finding something you purely enjoy, and using that for momentum to fundamentally change the trajectory of your life, rather than staying paralyzed by regret.
Well, we have covered a whole lot of ground today. We have seen exactly how Travis Kelce navigated his way from being a kid in Cleveland worshiping 90s wrestlers and Sega Genesis heroes, straight through the suffocating dark trap of trying to manage a fake public image, all the way to engineering a highly effective resilience playbook based on extreme ownership and daily discipline. He proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that authenticity isn't a given trait you're just born with. It is something you have to constantly, daily fight for by making better decisions. So, I want to leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up. Knowing that the ultimate undisputed power in your life lies entirely in your daily choices, what small decision can you make tomorrow morning to change your routine and reclaim your authenticity? Seriously, think about it. Will you set the alarm an hour earlier, and when the morning, will you go out and find your own version of summer baseball to lock in your focus? The playbook is sitting right there in front of you. It's totally up to you to run the play. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to make those decisions count. I'll see you next time.